The snow outside muffled the world into silence, but inside the therapist's office, the air was sharp with tension. You sit across from them, the person who has shaped so much of your life. Maybe it's a parent, maybe a partner, maybe the friend who always demanded more than they ever gave. The session was supposed to be calm, a place to finally lay truth on the table. You take a breath. I need space. I can't keep carrying everything for you. It's not dramatic. It's not cruel. It's just ordinary honesty. But in that moment, their face shifts. The mask slips for half a second. The smile freezes, the eyes harden, the temperature in the room drops 10 degrees. You haven't screamed, you haven't accused, you've simply named your need. And yet, you can feel it. The danger. Because what you've just done is the one thing a narcissist cannot stand, you've reminded them you are not theirs to control. This is how it happens. Not in grand betrayals or explosive arguments, but in the smallest of moments. A no. A silence. A laugh they weren't invited to. The question is, when those moments come, do you shrink back into the old role, or do you hold the line, knowing the fallout is the price of your freedom? And here's the promise, in the next few minutes, I'll share 10 ordinary things narcissists cannot stand, and, more importantly, what you can do instead. The shadow they can't escape. Carl Jung once warned that what we repress in ourselves does not vanish, it becomes the shadow, projected onto those around us. For the narcissist, projection is not an occasional slip of the psyche. It is their entire survival system. Every insecurity, every shameful fragment, every wound too unbearable to face gets flung outward, onto you. And then they punish you for carrying it. But here's what almost nobody tells you, it isn't always the dramatic confrontations that trigger this projection. It's the ordinary things, the everyday acts of autonomy, joy, or connection that remind them you exist beyond their control. A laugh with friends. A moment of calm when they're baiting you into rage. A success you don't apologize for. These simple, human experiences become unbearable to someone whose identity depends on being the center of your world. That's why this matters for you, not as an abstract theory, but as a daily reality. If you don't recognize these fault lines, you'll spend your life shrinking, smoothing, apologizing for things that should never need apology. And to be clear, Jung never wrote directly about narcissism in the modern clinical sense. But his warnings about masks, shadows, and projections describe these dynamics with uncanny precision. The narcissist lives in persona, the mask. They deny the shadow, the insecurity, the fragility, and force you to carry it instead. In earlier journeys we've explored how masks crack, how projections collapse, how empaths awaken to their strength. But this chapter is different. This one isn't about the extraordinary, it's about the ordinary. 10 simple things that every narcissist secretly can't stand, and how you can respond without losing yourself. Because awareness is power. And the moment you see the pattern clearly, you stop being their mirror, and start being yourself again. Why the ordinary feels like betrayal. Here's the uncomfortable truth, narcissists are not undone by betrayal, nor by the grand confrontations you rehearse in your head at night. They are undone by the smallest, most ordinary acts of living. Picture a family dinner. The plates are set, conversation hums along, and for once, you tell a story that lands. Maybe it's about finishing a project at work, or the funny thing your child said that morning. People laugh, nod, lean closer. For a brief moment, the light is on you. And then, silence. The narcissist sits back, arms crossed. They offer no smile, no acknowledgement. Within seconds, they derail the room with a dramatic interruption, a health scare, a forgotten insult, a crisis only they can solve. The story shifts, the attention snaps back to them, and you're left wondering if you did something wrong, That's the trap. Ordinary joy, yours, not theirs, feels like theft. Ordinary confidence feels like rebellion. Ordinary silence feels like abandonment. From a psychological lens, it makes sense. The narcissist's sense of self is fragile, built almost entirely from external validation. When you shine without them, when you set a limit, when you simply breathe outside their rhythm, it threatens the scaffolding holding their identity together. And here's the danger: if you don't recognize this truth, you'll start adjusting your life downward. You'll make yourself smaller at dinner. You'll dull your laughter so it won't echo too loudly. You'll over-explain your boundaries until they sound like apologies. And piece by piece, you'll disappear. So let me ask you this: how many times have you caught yourself shrinking just to avoid the fallout? Because awakening begins when you finally see it for what it is. Not proof of your selfishness, but proof of their dependency. Not a reason to shrink, but a reason to stand taller. And that brings us to the 10 ordinary acts that narcissists cannot stand, the very things that, once reclaimed, begin to rewrite your life. 10 everyday acts that break their control. Before we step into them, a quick note. We're not here to hand out medical labels. What we're exploring are patterns of behavior, the dynamics you may recognize in daily life. And if you're in a situation that feels unsafe or overwhelming, reaching out to a therapist or support group can make all the difference. Healing is heavy work, and it's not meant to be walked alone. If the battlefield is ordinary life, then the weapons are disarmingly simple. 10 acts so human, so natural, that most people wouldn't think twice about them. But to a narcissist, each one is unbearable, because each one whispers the same dangerous truth: you are separate. You cannot be owned. Let's step into these 10 moments and see why they trigger such fury, and what you can do instead. 1. When you say no. It seems harmless: I can't make it tonight. Or, no, that doesn't work for me. But to a narcissist, no is not a boundary. It is betrayal. Picture a daughter telling her father she won't be available every weekend anymore. He doesn't hear balance, he hears abandonment. The reaction is swift: guilt trips, accusations of disloyalty, or sudden withdrawal. Why it matters: a narcissist's survival depends on unfiltered access to your time and energy. Boundaries cut off that supply. What to do instead? Hold the line. Boundaries aren't punishments, they're declarations of selfhood. Every no you stand by teaches your nervous system that you have the right to exist. 2. When you're happy without them. You post a photo online, laughing with friends. Hours later, your phone lights up. Who was there? Why wasn't I invited? The anger isn't about where you went, it's that you experience joy outside their orbit. The psychology: most brains mirror joy, our mirror neurons light up when we see others smile. But in narcissistic patterns, joy doesn't trigger empathy, it triggers emptiness, reminding them of the joy they can't sustain on their own. What to do instead? Don't dim your light. Joy hidden out of fear shrinks your world to the size of their insecurity. Shared joy multiplies, it's oxygen, not a weapon. 3. When you stand on your own. Financial independence. Emotional independence. Even the quiet independence of having your own inner world. Each one strips away leverage. Consider a man moving out of his controlling mother's house. For years she kept him tethered through guilt and dependency, but when he pays his own bills, her late-night guilt trips lose their grip. The spell is broken. What to do instead? Celebrate every step toward independence, no matter how small. Cooking for yourself, making a decision without permission, building skills that free you from reliance, all of these chip away at their illusion of ownership. So let me ask you this: already in these first 3, which one resonates most with you? The boundary, the joy, or the independence? 4. When you're yourself. Masks are their lifeline. Jung called it the persona, the face we show the world. Narcissists live inside theirs. But when you drop yours, when you speak plainly, dress as you like, live in alignment, you shine light on the hollowness of their performance. Think of the colleague who mocks you for being too much yourself. What they can't say is this: your authenticity terrifies them, because it reveals their act. What to do instead? Keep choosing truth over performance. Authenticity is not rebellion, it's resonance. 5. When you succeed. You land a promotion. You fall in love. You finish a marathon. To you, success is growth. To them, it's a mirror they cannot bear to face. Instead of congratulations, they minimize, anyone could have done that. Or they poison it, let's see how long it lasts. Why it stings: success highlights their unhealed wounds. It reminds them of the gap between what they present and what they feel inside. What to do instead? Never apologize for progress. Their envy is not proof you've stolen anything, it's proof you've touched the wound they refuse to heal. 6. When you stay calm. They thrive on chaos. They bait, provoke, and prod, waiting for the explosion that proves you're unstable. But when you breathe instead of break, the script collapses. Picture them raising their voice at dinner, eyes darting, waiting for you to snap. Instead, you take a slow sip of water. The silence stretches. And for the first time, they have nothing left to play. What to do instead? Learn regulation tools, deep breathing, grounding, even walking away mid-conversation. Calm is not weakness. It is disarming strength. 7. When you own your mistakes. It sounds paradoxical, but accountability enrages them. When you say, "You're right, I was late," you shine a spotlight on their refusal to ever do the same. Instead of appreciation, you get escalation: "You're always late. Remember last year? And the year before that?" Your ownership makes their denial more obvious, so they double down. What to do instead? Keep modeling responsibility. Not to convince them, but to anchor yourself. Accountability is maturity, and maturity is kryptonite to manipulation. Think about it, 7 points in. How many of these ordinary acts have already shown up in your life? 8. When you build real connections. Genuine friendships terrify narcissists. They break the strings of isolation and give you a world beyond their control. Think of the friend who suddenly criticizes every new relationship you form. Are you sure they really like you? The aim is obvious: erode your trust until you retreat back into their monopoly. What to do instead? Invest in reciprocal relationships. Choose people who celebrate your wins, respect your boundaries, and stay steady through conflict. These bonds become the net that catches you when isolation no longer works. And yes, trauma bonds or family obligations can make this feel impossible. That's why connection isn't just social, it's survival. Even one safe relationship can be the thread that begins to unravel control. 9. When you refuse the game. For them, every interaction is a contest: who's smarter, louder, more admired. But when you decline to compete, you rob them of the battlefield. Picture a coworker bragging about their numbers, waiting for you to flinch or one-up. Instead, you nod: "That's great. I'm glad it worked out." They wanted a rival, not a witness. What to do instead? Shift from competition to contribution. Your worth is not measured in trophies. It's measured in presence. 10. When you choose silence. The simplest act of all, and the one they hate most. Not explaining. Not defending. Not filling the air. Just silence. Because silence means you are no longer hooked. No longer feeding the script. And for someone who survives on reaction, silence is starvation. What to do instead? Let silence be strength, not punishment. It's not avoidance, it's a declaration: I will not fuel your chaos. So now you've heard all 10. Which one resonates most deeply with your own story, and which one feels hardest to practice? These 10 acts may look ordinary, but to a narcissist, they're existential threats. Each one says, you cannot control me. I am not yours to script, and that's when the paradox begins. The paradox of awakening. But here's where the path turns dangerous. When you start practicing these 10 ordinary acts, holding boundaries, protecting your joy, refusing to compete, you expect freedom. You expect relief. But often, what comes first is backlash. You've changed. You're cold now. You don't care anymore. The words sting because they come from the very people you once carried, the ones you sacrificed yourself to please. And in their eyes, your healing doesn't look like strength. It looks like betrayal. Take Sarah, a woman who spent years as her family's emotional shock absorber. At every holiday, every late-night call, she stepped in to soothe, to fix, to carry. When she finally said, I can't be available every time you call, the reaction was swift. Her mother sighed, you used to be so kind. Her siblings whispered, she thinks she's better than us now. But Sarah hadn't become selfish. She had become whole. Carl Jung warned of this very paradox. To integrate the shadow, to own both our light and our darkness, means we stop bending into the shape others demand of us. And to those invested in our weakness, wholeness feels like hardness. Modern psychology explains it too. Emotional regulation in one person often dysregulates another who thrives on chaos. Your calm forces them to face their storm. Your accountability highlights their denial. Your silence forces them to hear the noise of their own thoughts. And then comes the darker temptation, the shadow side of awakening. Because once you taste freedom, revenge whispers. You feel the urge to flip the script, to dominate as you were dominated. To use silence not as protection but as punishment, to wield boundaries like weapons instead of shields. This is the razor's edge. The very tools that save you can, in the wrong hands, corrupt you. Jung called this being possessed by the shadow, when instead of integrating darkness, we let it rule us. So the paradox cuts two ways. To outsiders, your healing may look like cruelty. And inside yourself, your unhealed rage may disguise itself as justice. The challenge is to walk between. To be firm without becoming hard. Free without becoming cold. Whole without becoming cruel. Because this is the point where many lose their way, either collapsing back into old patterns of compliance, or becoming a mirror image of what they escaped. And that's why the next choice matters most. The crossroads, heal or harm. Every journey reaches a crossroads. And if you've lived in the orbit of a narcissist, you already know this moment. It doesn't arrive with fanfare. It comes quietly, in the middle of an ordinary day. You're on the phone, and they bait you. You're at the table, and they try to steal your joy. You're in the room, and they wait for your reaction, and then it hits you, you have a choice. Do you heal, or do you harm? Do you grow, or do you control? Do you choose truth, or do you choose manipulation? The decision is never abstract. It lives in the smallest of moments. When you hold a boundary without apology, you choose healing. When you stay calm instead of exploding, you choose growth. When you refuse to compete, you choose truth. But when you twist your boundaries into weapons, when you use silence to punish, when you let superiority creep in, that's when the shadow reclaims you. Carl Jung believed individuation, the process of becoming whole, was humanity's deepest task. Not perfection, not purity. Wholeness. To integrate the shadow means to acknowledge our capacity for cruelty without being ruled by it, to choose clarity over chaos again and again. And here's why this matters: your choice doesn't end with you. When one person in a family learns to hold boundaries, children watching inherit that language. When one person in a workplace refuses to play power games, others breathe easier. When one person breaks free of the orbit, the entire gravitational field begins to shift. Your choice is never private. It ripples. It shapes legacies. So the question is not only, what do you want for yourself? The deeper question is, what do you want to leave behind? Will you pass on patterns of control or patterns of clarity? Will your legacy be silence born of fear or silence born of strength? Because in the end, this is the true mark of awakening, not how loudly you declare your freedom, but how deeply that freedom transforms the lives around you. The ripples of freedom. So here we are. 10 ordinary things. Boundaries. Joy. Independence. Authenticity. Success. Calm. Accountability. Connection. Refusing to compete. Silence. To most people, these are the basic ingredients of a healthy life. But to a narcissist, they are intolerable, because each one whispers the same truth: you cannot control me. And that's why this isn't just a list. It's a map. A reminder that awakening is not an end but a beginning. The beginning of living without apology. The beginning of choosing presence over performance. The beginning of becoming someone who no longer bends their light to fit another person's shadow. But here's the question that lingers when this ends and you return to your own life: which of these 10 do you still struggle with? Where do you still hand away your power in the name of peace? And what would happen if you reclaimed it today? Because the truth is this: every act of freedom, no matter how ordinary, creates ripples. In your family. In your friendships. In your workplace. And in the children who sit quietly watching, learning what strength looks like. And let's be honest, we all slip into these patterns at times. The difference is whether we can recognize them, take accountability, and choose differently. So when the moment comes, when the bait is thrown, when the room goes cold, will you shrink back, or will you stand? If this resonated with your journey, share your story below. Not just for you, but for the thousands who will read it and realize they're not alone. Because in the end, the things narcissists can't stand are the very things that make us human. And once you reclaim them, there is no going back.